And then remember that Jesus and the fig tree thing. It's the same thing. That fig tree where he curses the fig tree for not bearing fruit out of season is wrapped around Jesus clearing the temple. And that is significant because of this. So you might want to wonder, why would someone make up a story like that? Why would Mark specifically say that it wasn't even the season for figs? And the way Mark writes it is, Jesus is walking along. Jesus is hungry, and he sees a fig tree in the distance, but it was not the season for figs. So Mark says that, and like Jesus knows it's not the season for figs, but he walks up to it anyway, as if expecting there to be fruit there for no reason. And he gets angry there's no fruit there, and he curses the tree and says, "May you never bear fruit again." And then the next day they come back and the tree is withered to its very roots. Now the next day, remember what happens in between? Jesus goes into the temple and condemns the corruption of the temple cult and turns over the tables and so on. Obviously a fictional story, people can't wither fig trees, nor would any real person cure one, or curse one for not bearing figs out of season. But what we do know from peer-reviewed literature, there's people who've done literary analysis as mainstream view, the entire story is an allegory for God's abandonment of the temple. The fig tree represents the temple cult. The ancient Jewish religion was fundamentally based on temple atonement rituals. Every year you underwent an atonement ritual, and that cleansed all the people of Israel of their sins. It was weak magic because you were using animals, and animals are weaker mojo. Animal blood is weaker mojo than human blood. So it only lasts a year. The spell duration is 1 year, so you have to keep repeating it year after year. But what happened, of course, before Mark wrote his gospel, is the Romans came and destroyed the temple and ended the temple cult. So this was a huge existential crisis for the Jewish people at the time. And it left a big question, like, why would God allow heathens to come in and destroy his own temple and end his own cult? Well, Mark is telling a story through this miracle story of the fig tree that's basically the message of which is God decided it is no longer the season for that instrument. It's no longer the time for that thing anymore to bear fruit, so it will no longer bear fruit anymore. So the fig tree is the temple cult. So when Jesus curses it, he's representing the action of Jehovah or Yahweh in cursing the fig tree and cursing the temple and getting it out of the place. And then of course Jesus immediately after the fig tree is seen cursed and withered, he explains, well, now what you do is you pray and you get things for prayer and stuff, and you don't need the temple cult anymore. But the thing is this is wrapped around the temple story of him clearing the temple. So first he goes up to this weird story where he sees this thing. It's no longer the season for figs, but he curses it, says, "May you no longer bear fruit again." And then immediately he goes and clears the temple and condemns the corruption of the temple cult. And then they walk out and they find the fig tree is withered, and he says, "See, now do you understand?" So this is the whole message here. It's a story about the temple. It's allegory. It's not meant to be taken literally. And of course, obviously it couldn't be literal.